morning Year 5 and 6, it's Miss Jennings here with another English lesson for you. It is Wednesday the 3rd of Feb today and our learning intention is, can I organise my ideas into paragraphs? Okay, so in yesterday's lesson you were answering the question, do you agree or disagree that the Budmouth Point locals should help the refugees? And today we're going to be organising our ideas into a box it up plan, as you can see here. Okay, so on the board I have got 6 possible paragraph titles, but I've only got 4 sections in my box it up plan. Okay, so I'd like you to have a read through these 6 titles that I've got bullet pointed here and have a think where they might go in my box it up plan. Okay, so pause the video now, have a think, and then we'll have a look at it together. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to have a go at thinking about where our 6 headings might go on our box it up plan. Hopefully you might have noticed that there are 2 red herrings in there. Okay, so who does Pixie belong to? So that one's not actually really relevant to the question that we're trying to answer today, is it? So I'm going to cross that one out. We don't need that one in our box it up plan. Which other one do you think was a red herring? So let's have a look. Why does Cliff's tummy hurt? Again, that's another one, not really relevant to the question we're answering, is it? Okay, so now we're just left with 4. So that's the number that we need for our box it up plan. But now we need to make sure that they're in the right order. Okay, so I think the most obvious one now to place is our conclusion. Okay, so where does the conclusion go? Well, it's not going to go right at the beginning, is it? And it's not really going to go in the middle. So I'm going to do an arrow to show that my conclusion is going to go in my last box of my box it up plan. Okay, let's have a look at another one. So we have left, why are refugees fleeing Europe? We have why you are writing, and we have do you agree or disagree? Okay, well, I know that when we're letter writing, our letters usually start with what we're writing about. Okay, so I think I'm going to take why you are writing and put that at the start of my box it up plan, which leaves me why are refugees fleeing Europe and do you agree or disagree? Well, I think it only really makes sense to talk about why refugees are fleeing first, and then we can explain whether we agree or we disagree. Okay, so that's the order that we are going to be writing our box it up plans in this morning. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to find the box it up template on the blog, but if you haven't, go and have a look for it now, or pause the video and you can draw out your own box it up plan. You just need to draw 4 boxes and then you can label each of your 4 boxes with the headings that we've discussed here. So your task this week is to write a formal letter to Budmouth Point Council explaining why you agree or disagree that the Budmouth Point locals should be helping the refugees. Okay, but so with any piece of writing we need to do a plan first. So that's what we're going to do now with our box it up plan. So the first box is why are you writing? Okay, so this is where you're going to explain or very briefly explain what your letter is about. So it's about whether or not you agree or disagree that the Budmouth Point locals should be helping the refugees. Okay, but so within that paragraph, I'd like you to include some key vocabulary. Okay, so for example, an important word to include would be refugee. Refugee is a really key word for you to get into your first paragraph. Okay, also you could include the word flee or forced. Okay, because the Jews were forced out of Europe by Nazi Germany. Okay, so another one would be Hitler. Okay, and also Nazi Germany. I'm going to write that one down here. Okay, so there we go.
Hello Year 5 and 6, I'm going to talk you through your second paragraph in your Box It Up plan, which is why are refugees fleeing Europe? And whenever you're writing a letter, there's normally a problem that needs solving, or you're offering a solution to a problem. And our problem is, why are refugees trying to get to Budmouth Point, or basically why are refugees fleeing Europe? So we need to think of what we've learnt in our history lessons, in our guided reading lessons, and we know that Hitler blamed the Jews for Germany's downfall before World War II. So that could be our first bullet point of Hitler blamed Jews. Literally, Hitler blamed the Jews, but we know that he blamed it for all of Germany's problems, and sort of why he started World War II, why he wanted Germany to have more power. But for our notes, for our plan, I think that's more than enough to remind me, right, Hitler didn't like the Jews. Next. So what did that mean for the Jews? If Hitler blamed them, what was happening in Nazi Germany during World War II? And we know that Jews weren't allowed to go to the cinema, and Jewish children weren't allowed to go to the same schools. So we can say, can anyone remember that word that was in the Anne Frank guided reading that we did a couple of weeks ago? So Jewish people were discriminated. And we know that means treated differently. So because of Hitler's feelings towards them, they were treated differently. They were discriminated. And last week in history, you learned all about the Holocaust, where Jewish people were rounded up and mistreated under the orders of Hitler because of their religion. And that was the only fact, because they were Jewish. So you could mention the Holocaust. And I could put the keyword mistreated. Basically, they were not safe. And that's a really nice way to round off our paragraph, because we can say that they were forced to leave Germany for their safety. And that is how I would plan your second paragraph.
Okay, so moving on to section 3 of our Box It Up plan. Okay, so we are on the do you agree or disagree section. So at the end of last lesson, you should have written a couple of sentences explaining why you either agree or you disagree with the question. Okay, so myself and Miss Smart are now going to have a bit of a discussion about whether we agree or whether we disagree. Okay, and we're going to write a few bullet points showing some agree points and some disagree points. But when you write out yours, you need to make sure it's your opinion. Okay, so you can take some inspiration from what we write down here, but you need to make sure that in your letter it's your opinion of whether you agree or you disagree and the points that you have come up with.
So, you agree, Miss Jennings. What would you say if you agreed that the Budmouth Point locals should help the refugees?
Well, so the first thing I would say is that all of these refugees that are trying to come to Great Britain are fleeing Europe because, you know, they're innocent. They haven't done anything wrong. They're completely normal people with everyday lives, and they're just being discriminated against by Hitler for no other reason apart from just because of their beliefs and the way they live their life. So I think that's a really key one, is that they are innocent.
Definitely.
What do you think, Miss Smart?
I do agree that they are innocent, but thinking of the point of view of Britain, if I disagreed that the Budmouth Point locals shouldn't help the refugees, I would be thinking from the point of view of Britain, in that Britain was under strict rationing because of food shortages during the war. So if we helped refugees and allowed them into Britain, that would put a bigger strain on the food shortages. So one of my points would be, there's already a food shortage. And we could put rationing, another key word from what we've learnt so far this term. Yeah, and that would be a bad thing. That would be a disadvantage for Britain if we did allow Jewish refugees into the country.
Yeah, I understand that point. I think that is a really good point. But the only thing is, if they actually stay in Europe and, you know, Nazi Germany are trying to take over and control, they're not going to be safe there. So I don't know what their other choice is other than to flee. If they stay, they're just not going to be safe. So I think that's going to be my second point in my agree section, is that the Jewish people aren't safe. So I'm going to write not safe in my plan.
And that's really true. It's not their fault, it's they're being forced. We've already got forced and flee in the beginning of our letter. It's not their choice, they have to stay safe, and I do appreciate that. But because of Hitler blaming the Jews, I think a point for my disagree side would be, we don't know how Hitler would retaliate against Britain by us taking in the Jewish refugees. Retaliate is another word for sort of fight back or answer back. What would he do in response to us taking in the Jewish refugees? So I think for my point, I'm going to put the question, would Hitler retaliate? To think, would we be putting Britain in more danger and a more fragile position in the war by taking in the Jewish refugees?
Yeah, no, that's another really good point. So, I mean, there are 4 there, or 2 points on each side, agree or disagree, that we've just discussed there. But I think there are so many more that we could talk about, and there must be so many more by now on the Padlet that we were talking about yesterday. So if you are struggling for some ideas, you could go over onto the Padlet and see what other people have written on there for their ideas of whether they agree or disagree and why.
We are now on to our last section of our Box It Up plan, and that is the conclusion. Whenever you're concluding something, a letter or a piece of writing, what you're doing is summarising the main points that you talked about. So our conclusion will be the main points in our letter, and making sure we've answered the question, do you agree or disagree that the Budmouth Point locals should help the refugees? So if you do any... So make sure in your conclusion that you've answered that question. Remember that this is our planning day. This is only a plan, so you only need bullet points. You don't need to write full sentences, because tomorrow we will be writing out our formal letter. Join us tomorrow.